Good Tuesday afternoon to you. Hope you're having a great day. Thanks for joining us on Sports4CLE. Plenty of Browns to talk about. We'll also talk a little Cavs later in the show, getting ready for that play-in game against the Brooklyn Nets, trying to get into the playoffs in the NBA, which the play-in tournament starts tonight. A little later, Brad Ward will join us to talk Browns, and we begin by talking Browns with Tim Bielik from the Plain Dealer as well as cleveland.com. So, Tim, some news concerning Deshaun Watson comes out, and this none of the 22 civil lawsuits against Deshaun Watson will go to trial during the NFL season. Again, this is from Adam Fries, one of your colleagues, a crime reporter. So the legal aspect of it is they're saying none of them will be tried during the NFL season, which leads to a greater possibility that Deshaun Watson will be available for all 17 games. And still not certain, you still have to let it play out. But if none of the litigation goes through during the season, certainly sounds like there's a better possibility that Deshaun Watson could be available for the entire season.
Absolutely. I mean, this is nothing but good news, I think, for the Browns. The fact that, the legal stuff is probably not going to take away from, his focus and preparation for the season. And it also, like you said, seems unlikely that the NFL would suspend Deshaun Watson before all these verdicts came out, because honestly, it would make very little sense. I know Roger Goodell is not going to be handing down the suspensions as he has. It's now going to come down to an independent third-party arbitrator to make that decision. But it seems like it would make very little sense for the NFL to make a decision without knowing the results of the 22 cases, without knowing if Watson's going to have to, if Watson's innocent or guilty. And again, these are civil cases, so we're talking largely fines and some injunctions in some cases. Very unlikely would jail time be part of the equation when it comes to civil cases. But, the fact that these might not happen until after 2022 season, we're talking like offseason of 2023, maybe it makes it more likely that if a suspension happens, it wouldn't be for a year, where the NFL wouldn't have all the information it would need before it can make a final determination. Doesn't mean it won't happen. Doesn't mean he won't get suspended this season. But like you said, it just makes it more likely that maybe he doesn't and he's on the field week one.
Yeah, and Roger Goodell has said it's not likely that he will be part of the commissioner's exempt list and all of those things. So we'll wait and see. We'll let it play out. But again, it certainly sounds more and more like he may be available for all 17 games. All right. So J.C. Tretter, former Brown, current free agent, still head of the NFLPA, the Players Association, tweets this out regarding the contract. And basically what they're saying is they're hoping that the Deshaun Watson contract leads to much more guaranteed money for NFL players. And we've already heard that some of the owners are against it. And I get why the owners would be against it. But if I'm the players, football is the area where you get beat up so much. You want guaranteed money, just because one of the things that is a risk of playing football is injury, and it's significantly greater than baseball, basketball, or any other sport.
No question about it. I mean, the NFL career is not a given. I mean, not many guys play, 10 to 15 years like you see with some of the greats out there. I mean, the average career is not much more than a couple seasons, whether it's, injuries or roster turnover or different things like that. But, I mean, we see injuries pop up all the time across the NFL. It is a full-speed collision sport, so it makes sense for the players to want that guaranteed money, to know that no matter what happens to them, if they blow out their knee or whatever, if they have a concussion and they miss several weeks, that they know where their money's coming from. And it makes perfect sense. I mean, the NFL really is the only sport that doesn't have these fully guaranteed contracts for all these players. Now, some of them do get the full guarantees. I think Kirk Cousins was the prominent example before the Deshaun Watson trade and extension, because he had a fully guaranteed contract. You see a lot of first-round picks in every draft that have fully guaranteed contracts. So it happens in some cases, but it should be interesting to see if this signing in particular, what happens with Deshaun Watson, that the fact that he's getting all this money fully guaranteed right from the start, if that's going to be the start of something, if that's where, the waves of free agency begin to change, that it's not necessarily about, how much money someone gets in the total contract, but whether they can get the fully guaranteed contract from somebody else and how much that could potentially influence decisions, maybe in the next few seasons.
So still some free agents out there that the Browns have been connected with, and in one of them, Jarvis Landry. Some news coming out. Browns still very much in the mix. There are a couple of other teams that are considered to be interested in Landry as well. Landry hopes to sign somewhere before the draft. That's only a couple of weeks away now. But, some of the names you've heard are the Saints. I'm sure, as you mentioned, the Packers, the Chiefs. Anybody that's looking for a wide receiver will be looking to see if Jarvis Landry is willing to take less than that $20 million that we heard, but certainly, still a decent size money as far as a free agent wide receiver goes.
Yeah, absolutely. And again, it's kind of an example of how weird this free agency period has been, how much, maybe this process for a lot of these guys that's been halted by some of these crazy contracts, in particular the one that Christian Kirk got with the Jacksonville Jaguars when he got incredibly big money. And I think we're kind of seeing it play out now where it's kind of the holding pattern where, the player wants a certain amount of money. The team's only going to be willing to give him a certain amount, but how long before, they finally get to the happy medium and then value in this third or fourth wave of free agency really starts to sort itself out and become more realistic. And I think obviously if the Browns can get Jarvis Landry back and keep him for 2022, he could be obviously in a smaller role than he was in the last few seasons, where he doesn't have to be the number one guy. He could be the number 2 behind Amari Cooper or the number 3 behind Cooper and whoever they draft, or if they sign somebody else like Will Fuller. He's going to be in a lesser role, but, his leadership is going to be important. The fact that he knows the offense would be helpful as well. There's a lot of good factors for Jarvis Landry and a potential for him to stay in Cleveland. And I think it seems like, based off social media, that seems like that's kind of what he wants. It just kind of comes down to, as we usually see in free agency, how the money works itself out.
And it'll be, there are certain things you mentioned. Fuller, another one would be Clowney. So there's a number of ways that they have to divvy up the salary cap structure that they have left. And the other thing is Baker Mayfield's eaten up some of that as well. So all those things factor into dollar figures and when and if they can sign certain free agents. An interesting thing, so D'Ernest Johnson, guy that's basically the Browns' third running back, now has a new agency representing him, and Drew Rosenhaus, which is a little bit of a yikes. Rosenhaus, one of those high-priced guys that's not adverse to making some waves as far as representing his clients. But then also Jack Duffin tweets, Browns still hold all the leverage with D'Ernest Johnson because he is a restricted free agent. He's probably chasing a better deal on the market before signing his tender than taking the offer. And you see what that number would be, $2.4 million. Huge insurance policy. And, if you want to go down that road, I think D'Ernest Johnson is somebody who probably played his way into having some trade value. When the Browns needed him last year, he was pretty darn good.
No question about that. I mean, it's amazing the growth that D'Ernest Johnson has made in these last 2 seasons, when he was a guy who barely made the roster after having a very good preseason in 2020, had some nice spot carries that season. Then in the Denver Broncos game in 2021, with Nick Chubb and Kareem Hunt both out, he really made a name for himself, just very productive, was able to and really took the spotlight on a nationally televised game. And I mean, he's a guy who I think seems like he's ready for a bigger role. He's more talented than your typical third running back. He's only the third running back in Cleveland because you have Chubb and Hunt already in the backfield. And, when you see this news, obviously he's going to want to get paid, and I think he deserves to get paid pretty decent money. The question is it going to be too much for the Browns? To pay him. Like you said, there's only so much room in the salary cap. I know there's the idea of the salary cap is a myth and everything like that. You can make it work, but you still kind of have to manage it a little bit when it comes to, signing free agents and bringing guys in who are currently not on the cap and bringing them in and trying to make those numbers work. So I'm fascinated how it's all going to play out. But, now that he's obviously working with Drew Rosenhaus, he seems like he's going to get the money. And, quite honestly, given everything he's been through, this incredible journey he's been on, I'd argue he's pretty deserving of a good payday.
Tim Bielik and I are going to step aside, take a quick time out. Other side of the break, we'll talk about Tim's series on Andrew Berry's first 2 drafts and what they have shown us as we look ahead to this year's draft. Part 3 of his series, 5-star recruits. Straight ahead on Sports4CLE. Stay with us.
Come back to go forward. Back to learning new things. Back to pursuing your dreams. Tri-C has flexible learning options to fit your life. And every year, more than 1,000 local companies provide Tri-C students with real-world learning. The right education can boost your lifetime earning power by hundreds of thousands of dollars. Start now with a college education you can afford. Tri-C, where futures begin.
When it comes to selling you a mattress, most retailers are handing you a long line of extra steps that drive up costs and create confusion. At the Original Mattress Factory, we simplify the mattress shopping experience by building mattresses and box springs in our own local factories and selling them direct to you. It's short, sweet, and simply makes sense. So experience more than just a mattress store. Experience an original, the Original Mattress Factory.
The Ohio Lottery Partners in Education program recognizes role model students and teachers from across Ohio. Nominations can now be done completely online. To nominate a deserving teacher or student, go to ohiolottery.com. In the About section, find Partners in Education. There you will find links to the nomination forms. Students kindergarten through 12th grade can be academic all-stars. Teachers can be honored as a Teacher of the Month. The Ohio Lottery Partners in Education, where stars shine. We continue talking Browns with Tim Bielik from Plain Dealer as well as cleveland.com. Tim has just finished up 3-part series on what we've learned from Andrew Berry's first 2 drafts. Tim, last time you were on, we talked about the first 2. Earlier today, the part 3 came out. Tell us about it and what you found out.
Yeah, so part 1, I talked about how Andrew Berry's leaned towards drafting younger players in his first 2 drafts. Part 2 was about the Power 5 prospects. Part 3 is focusing on 5 stars. In each of his last 2 drafts, he's taken a 5-star prospect in the later rounds. In 2020, it was Michigan receiver Donovan Peoples-Jones. They made him a 6th-round pick. He's been pretty productive for a 6th-round pick, almost 1,000 yards, in his first 2 seasons in the NFL. Last year, it was Georgia safety Richard LeCown in the 5th round. We didn't see a lot of him in the regular season, but, it's to be expected for a young player, and obviously he really flashed in the preseason. And, there's plenty of reason to trust in a 5-star. They're 5 stars for a reason coming out of high school, whether they're incredibly talented, they have tremendous physical abilities that separate them from the thousands of high school prospects in their recruiting class. And you look at this class in particular, two guys that are former 5-stars have a chance to be top 5 picks. I look at Alabama tackle Evan Neal, Oregon edge rusher Kayvon Thibodeau. Both guys could be top 5 picks. They both have a shot to be number 1 picks. Then also another guy, Derek Stingley Jr. from LSU, number 1 guy, depending on where you look at the time of his recruiting class. I believe it was 2019. He's got a chance to go very high. But for the Browns in particular, if they're looking to go and continue this trend, there's several guys they can go for. In the 2nd round alone, they could have an option at 44 if they stay there to pick between guys like George Pickens from Georgia, who I've talked about before. I really like him because of his size and his hands are tremendous. And then there's also DeMarvin Leal, a defensive tackle from Texas A&M. Didn't exactly have the ideal career that you expect from a 5-star, but, still got very good physical traits. Guy's got a lot of versatility. Then you look at the 3. I'm a big fan late. I put him in my latest 7th-round mock draft a couple weeks ago. Ole Miss running back Jerry Neely. He's a smaller guy, but he's very good with the ball in his hands, especially, out of the backfield in certain situations. In this zone blocking team, you don't necessarily need big power backs. You see guys going to find the hole, and I think Jerry Neely can do that. You got to start preparing, I think, with Deshaun Watson's cap number skyrocketing in 2023. You might have to start preparing for life without Kareem Hunt. So that could be a name to watch later on. But plenty of options if Barry wants to go 3 for 3 on taking a 5-star.
All right. So let's take a look at some of the superlatives from draft prospects. Defensive line we're going to hit here. These are from Pro Football Focus. So where edge rushers are concerned, most versatile, they say Josh Paschal from Kentucky. And you see the rationale there. And 1.62, 10-yard split, pretty good. 30 reps on 225 at the bench press. So that'll give you some strength and some speed. And quickness interior. And then the best get-off in that thing is Nick Benito from Oklahoma. Twitchy, undersized rusher. You see his 1.53 10-second split. And again, that's pretty good off the line of scrimmage. If we look at tackles, best hands, they go to Travis Jones, Connecticut. That's a guy that has been linked to the Browns some. And you see his pass rushing grade the week of the Senior Bowl was pretty good as well. And then the most versatile, it's also Travis Jones. All right, when you look at those, does Travis Jones, and you see the size, 325, and again, 4.92 for a guy that big ain't bad. The 3-cone 733 is pretty darn good as well. You and I were talking before the show started. Traylon Burks, the wide receiver that we kind of like, ran a 7.28. So that'll tell you how good that 3-cone is for Travis Jones. If those guys, all three of those guys, if they're available there at 44, and there's a lot of projections that say they would be, which one makes the most sense for the Browns, do you think?
I feel like between those three guys in particular, the pick for me would be Travis Jones. I know he's not the type of defensive tackle that Andrew Berry has taken when you compare him to guys like Jordan Elliott, Tommy Togiai. Those guys are, just kind of more, they're more gap penetrators and that type of defensive tackle. I think Travis Jones, I look at him, he's pretty much your typical nose tackle type who's just going to plug the middle, try and take up multiple blockers, maybe free things up for your linebackers, make sure that they can, fly around and run down situations. He's not a guy that right now I think you could have out there consistently in pass rush situations, but I think if you're drafting, you're not looking for him to be a pass rusher. You're looking for him, a guy who's just going to stop the run and free everything up for the guys around him. And, that's add value, I think, particularly for teams that run the 3-4 base scheme that need a nose tackle. I don't know if he's that necessarily big for that, but in a 4-3 scheme, when you need two defensive tackles, maybe he could be a good fit, complement Jordan Elliott or Tommy Togiai, because neither one of them really has the size that Travis Jones has. And, I mean, the fact that he really has been a big winner in this pre-draft process. What he did at the Senior Bowl, following up with a pretty good combine, it's a very reasonable possibility for him to be an option at 44. I look at Paschal being a third-round option, maybe Nick Benito late in the second round. The Browns wanted to trade up or trade out from 78, trade down from 44 to make a move for him. He's more of a finesse guy than kind of a power guy that you see out of Josh Paschal.
All right, so along those lines, the NFL draft, NFL.com, has named 2 picks that are idea for each and every team. For the Browns, Travis Jones, who we have talked about, and then in the third round, they like Kingsley Enagbare. What do you know about Enagbare, and do you like him?
Enagbare is a very interesting player. I look at him, and he's got a very interesting build. 6'3", 258 pounds. Didn't necessarily put up elite numbers at South Carolina, but was solid. 15 sacks, 24 tackles for loss in 44 games. I don't think he's going to be, like a superstar player, just because I think he doesn't have elite athletic ability. I think he can still be very good. Like, he's one of those guys that's got a pretty high floor where you can expect that he can, be on a roster, be in your rotation as a defensive end, kind of give you some balance, a guy who can play well against the run as well as against the pass. It may not be elite in both of them, but he can at least be solid and just a solid guy, where you can put him out there in any situation and he's going to win. He's going to win oftentimes with his motor and with some strength. So those are things that stick out about Enagbare. I mean, he's more of a substance over style type of edge rusher, not going to beat you with flash, but third round, if you're not looking for, if you're looking more for depth, I think Enagbari could be a decent depth offensive lineman.
All right. Who are some guys, some names to listen out for that if they fall into the second round and you know the Browns can move up 5, 6, 7, 8, 10 spots, and I'm going, you know, like a JOK of a year ago. Who are some guys that you think if they're sitting there, Andrew Berry would like enough to be to have to move up 5, 6, 8 spots to get in the second round?
I'm looking at the couple of the receivers that could fall down there, you know, particularly Treylon Burks from Arkansas. And, you know, way back in February, it just seemed crazy to think that Treylon Burks would fall to the late first round, potentially out of the first round. But, you know, he didn't test very well at the combine. The 3-cone time in particular was not very good. You know, for a bigger receiver who may not have elite speed, you've got to be able to separate. And agility is a good test of how well a player can separate. And with a 7.8 time in the 2.8 time in the 3-cone, not very good numbers for Treylon Burks. I don't know if he would slide out of the first round, but I mean, it's the draft. Anything crazy can happen. Jahan Dotson from Penn State is also a guy I really like. He may slide out just because he's not a bigger guy. He's under 6 foot. Granted, he has very good physical tools. Every time you watch Penn State, he pops when you watch him play. He can win a one-on-one. Even George Pickens could be someone interesting just because I feel like maybe he's a guy that may not make it to 44. You know, just the fact that his hands are so good. We talked about the very, very low drop rate. I think it was about 2.1%. We talked about that a few days ago. Maybe he doesn't make it to 44. Maybe he's a guy that you have to be aggressive and go up to get in order to get that guy. And I think, you know, because I've talked about the trends for Andrew Berry. George Pickens fits all three of those categories: age, Power 5, former 5-star. It almost seems like the perfect Andrew Berry pick. He just might I don't know if he'll be able to wait long enough to get him.
Tim Bielik and I are going to step aside, take a quick time out. Other side of the break, we head to the voicemail of truth and reason. Now, this one about Browns roster. Sports4CLE. We'll be right back. Stay with us.
When it comes to selling you a mattress, most retailers are handing you a long line of extra steps that drive up costs and create confusion. At the Original Mattress Factory, we simplify the mattress shopping experience by building mattresses and box springs in our own local factories and selling them direct to you. It's short, sweet, and simply makes sense. So experience more than just the mattress store. Experience an original, the Original Mattress Factory.
The Ohio Lottery Partners in Education program recognizes role model students and teachers from across Ohio. Nominations can now be done completely online. To nominate a deserving teacher or student, go to ohiolottery.com. In the About section, find Partners in Education. There you will find links to the nomination forms. Students kindergarten through 12th grade can be academic all-stars. Teachers can be honored as a Teacher of the Month. The Ohio Lottery Partners in Education, where stars shine.
Thanks for buying a fishing license. I want you to picture all the great things this simple purchase does. Like building public boat ramps, keeping local waters clean, and maintaining a healthy fish population.
What's Mom doing?
When you buy a fishing license, you do a lot. Every dollar protects and maintains your local waterways for future generations to enjoy. Visit takemefishing.org.
We continue talking Browns with Tim Bielik from the Plain Dealer and cleveland.com. Time for us to head to the voicemail of Truth and Reason. This one about the Browns roster and how it's taken care of by the head coach.
I mean, there's so much talent on this roster on the offensive side of the ball. Stefanski does not know how to use them. I mean, his ego was so big, it's just like my way or the highway. You know, he could have done a lot better with Baker, but he left him hanging out to dry injured. Any coach would have put him on the bench. You're a liability right now. So sit there. I don't care who cleared him to play. The coach should make. Why did he bring Case Keenum with him? He's his main guy. But no, we'll put Baker out there with his bad arms, shoulder. But yeah, Stefanski needs to go. And it'll be proven after this year with Deshaun Watson. Guaranteed. Thank you, Dave.
All right, as always, we appreciate all of the voicemails. I disagree, Tim. I think most head football coaches have that kind of mindset, and we'll see. Kevin Stefanski, I think the problem that the Browns had is Case Keenum's skill set didn't match what their offense was set up for with Baker Mayfield. And I think that's the reason that you saw Deshaun Watson, Jacoby Brissett, Joshua Dobbs. You are going to block the same way. You're going to run the same basic offense. You're going to tinker with plays. And it's not going to look exactly the same if you have to go away from Deshaun Watson because the other guys aren't as elite, but they have the same skill sets. Case Keenum's skill set did not match what the Browns had offensively.
No, not at all. And obviously, that's why the offense looked different when Keenum was in for his 2 starts versus when Baker was out there, for his 15 starts. I'm kind of with you. I kind of disagree on the idea that, Kevin Stefanski didn't manage the roster correctly. I mean, I argue he did the best he could because, when you have an injured quarterback like Baker Mayfield was a year ago, you're not going to air it out 50, 60 times just because, you're talking about a pain tolerance issue and, making your quarterback throw when he's not 100% and he's not going to be 100% until he was going to have that shoulder surgery. That would have been poor head coaching, I think, on Stefanski's part to keep, having Mayfield do something that physically he probably wasn't going to be able to do. And in terms of the ego thing, every head coach in the NFL is an ego. You have to have an ego. If you don't think you know what you're doing as a head coach, you're probably not going to be successful. His is more toned down, I think, than some other coaches you see. I think Stefanski has obviously been much more cerebral. And I think what you've seen through his 2 seasons, he's really tried to adjust his offense to what he has on the roster. Obviously, with, like you said, more mobile quarterbacks, all 3 quarterbacks the Browns have now are mobile. They can play very similar games. You can see an offense that's very similar. The only difference is the quality of quarterback that would be playing in those games, whether it's Watson or Jacoby Brissett or Josh Dobbs. The offense shouldn't look that much different, like you said, between those 3 guys.
Yeah, and keep in mind last year, you basically had Jarvis Landry on a leg and a half. He was injured most of the year. Beckham really wasn't there, even when he was playing. So really, Donovan Peoples-Jones was your number 1 receiver, and he's probably more built to be a 3 on a really good team. So there's a number of factors. There's plenty of blame to go around for what happened last year, and let's see how that plays out. All right, Bleacher Report grades all of the offseason moves for teams. For the Browns, they grade them as an A-. Hard to argue. We've talked a number of times the passing game needed upgrading, and I would say, Deshaun Watson, Amari Cooper upgrades that. I think the trade for Amari Cooper was well done. You paid him $20 million. You can extend him it's extended for a couple of years. And you saw the crazy deals that were going off the board in free agency, and it only cost you a 5th-round pick.
Yeah, so again, like you said, the problem with the Browns was the pass game. You get a number 1 receiver and you get one of the best quarterbacks in the NFL. It makes sense, obviously, to boost that grade up to where it is at an A-. Maybe it gets knocked a little bit because they traded 6 picks against Deshaun Watson. I'd argue that's the price you had to pay to go get a guy like that. And the biggest thing you gave up in that deal was the 13th pick in the draft. If Watson plays as expected, those next 2 first-round picks are going to be potentially in the mid to late 20s, possibly even in the 30s, depending on how far this team goes in the playoffs. So those are essentially super high 2nd-round picks. And then the Cooper deal, obviously you have to take on his salary, but they gave up very little to get him, basically just a pick swap to get Amari Cooper, who certainly I think is one of the more underrated receivers in the NFL. I'm fascinated how he's going to play alongside Deshaun Watson. And obviously there's still work to do. You still got to figure out who's going to start opposite Myles Garrett. You got to figure out how they're going to reshape the rest of the receiver group as far as, who's going to play on the depth chart between guys like Cooper and then the other guys like Donovan Peoples-Jones and Anthony Schwartz. Who's going to be your 2? Who's going to be your 3? Those are things still TBD. But, at this point of the season, you can argue the Browns really took care of those needs and what's become a passing game, obviously. And now they seem like they have a passing game that on paper has the ability to compete with pretty much anybody.
All right, let's take a look. Free agency. We've talked a little bit about the draft. Let's do some of the a reset. Some of the guys still on the market. Let's look at edge rushers in particular, because that's, I think, one of the areas the Browns need to shore up. So the top name is Clowney, Jadeveon Clowney, and you see these rankings. Then you go to Hughes, Barnett, Key, Flowers, Ingram, Houston. Those are the top ones that are still on the market. It's pretty slim pickings after Jadeveon Clowney. Gut feeling, do you think the Browns re-sign Jadeveon Clowney?
My gut says yes. I mean, it just seems like such a perfect fit. Clowney seemed like, he fit really well opposite Myles Garrett. They complemented each other really well. Clowney was healthy this season, had 9 sacks. He was productive. And, I think it was a good fit with this Joe Woods defense, because those two have such very different skills. That Garrett can win with power and speed on one side, and Clowney is really good at setting the edge in the run game. He's one of the better run defending defensive ends in the NFL. He proved it, and he can really be successful in a one-on-one situation. It's just going to come down to, is Clowney what kind of money the Browns going to pay Clowney, and if they can in fact get him. And if it's not him, maybe it's a guy like Jerry Hughes from the Bills. I know I look at his numbers, only 3 sacks a year ago. Obviously, he's an older player. He's going to be 34 years old on August 13th. Coincidentally, he has the exact same birth date as me, August 13th, 1988.
So that's why you like him.
Well, I mean, we're going to be the exact same age on the same day, but I'm obviously not as good of a pass rusher as Jerry Hughes. But, the stats, obviously, on paper, the traditional stats like sacks aren't going to stand out. But then you look at Pro Football Focus, his pass rush grade and 81.1 last season. Obviously, the age of 33 still showing he's got productivity, 45 pressures a year ago. He can still get it done. I don't know if he's a true number 2, but maybe he's a spot number 2. If you draft a guy in the second round, sort of a 2A, 2B at number 2, opposite Myles Garrett, or even say you get Clowney and Hughes, then all of a sudden you have 3 very good defensive ends. It's going to be interesting to see how it all kind of pans out in the next couple weeks. But I do think, obviously, priority number 1 should be keeping Jadeveon Clowney and keeping that duo of Garrett and Clowney intact for at least another season, if not 2 of them.
Tim Bielik and I are going to step aside, take another time out, other side of the break. A voicemailer responds to me calling him Mr. Mayfield. Sports for CLE. We'll be right back. Stay with us.
Come back to go forward. Back to learning new things. Back to pursuing your dreams. Tri-C has flexible learning options to fit your life. And every year, more than 1,000 local companies provide Tri-C students with real-world learning. The right education can boost your lifetime earning power by hundreds of thousands of dollars. Start now with a college education you can afford. Tri-C, where futures begin.
When it comes to selling you a mattress, most retailers are handing you a line. A long line of extra steps that drive up costs and create confusion. At the Original Mattress Factory, we simplify the mattress shopping experience by building mattresses and box springs in our own local factories and selling them direct to you. It's short, sweet, and simply makes sense. So experience more than just the mattress store. Experience an original, the Original Mattress Factory.
The Ohio Lottery Partners in Education program recognizes role model students and teachers from across Ohio. Nominations can now be done completely online. To nominate a deserving teacher or student, go to OhioLottery.com. In the About section, find Partners in Education. There you will find links to the nomination forms. Students kindergarten through 12th grade can be academic all-stars. Teachers can be honored as a Teacher of the Month. The Ohio Lottery Partners in Education, where stars shine. We continue talking Browns with Tim Bielik from the Plain Dealer as well as cleveland.com a little bit. A couple shows ago, a caller called in and defended Baker Mayfield. I referred to him as Mr. Mayfield, and he called to respond.
The last time I was on there, Dave called me Mr. Mayfield. That's not exactly correct, but you could call me Mr. Sooner Mayfield if you want to. If you will go and look at the 2017, 2018 highlights when Mayfield was a Sooner, you'll see his precision passing was unbeatable. Of course, he had Mark Andrews, Hollywood Brown, and CeeDee Lamb, which are all making really big names for themselves in the NFL, and none of the Browns can can even compete with them. Now, one other thing, that shoulder harness, people seem to downplay the fact he had to play with that for weeks. Strap it on and see how that affects you and how you feel with it. Because according to Matt Hasselbeck, it totally threw him off for accuracy, for strength, for even feeling confident in what he was doing. And again, I appreciate you having me on here. Thank you. Goodbye.
All right. As always, we appreciate all the voicemails, and I certainly appreciate your passion. I was one of the first people to, and you know this, Tim, I said the shoulder harness had to affect him, and I agree wholeheartedly. I don't think it was the only problem. And I don't think Baker Mayfield is a bad NFL quarterback. I think he will be a decent NFL quarterback, average to above average. You're going to have to put pieces around him that to be successful. I think Deshaun Watson is a clear upgrade, but I think Baker Mayfield's a capable NFL quarterback who will be a quarterback of a winning team. It just, even if it isn't here in Cleveland. So I don't want to sound like I am talking down about Baker Mayfield. I think he's a pretty good quarterback. I don't think he is as good of a quarterback as Deshaun Watson.
No, I mean, that's pretty obvious when you look at some of the things Deshaun Watson has done, on the field versus what Baker Mayfield has done, in his career. And I agree with you that harness really impacted him, and it really took away a lot of the things that Baker Mayfield does very well. I'm sure there's a lot of teams that would probably prefer Baker Mayfield over what they have at quarterback, just because, he's got a very high ceiling. We saw how good he was, in the 2018, the end of 2020. He showed he has very high level ability. The question has been consistency. And obviously the reason he's still with the Browns is just because he's got a massive contract that's only got a year left, that there's no certain that you're essentially trading for a 1-year tryout, essentially, of Baker, and wondering what exactly you have in him. But, he's solid enough. He can win you some games. Maybe he can get you into the playoffs as a quarterback. And obviously 2021, I think we saw, what a bad injury can do to him. Obviously, he just wasn't himself. I think we all can kind of understand that. But even when Mayfield is at his healthiest, I think we have to understand that Deshaun Watson, clear upgrade, like you said, and a guy that, has top 5 ability. And Mayfield might kind of be at best top 10.
All right, so let's take a look at this. This is from CBSSports.com, and it's evaluating Jimmy Garoppolo and Baker Mayfield's trade market. And not a whole lot right now. The quarterback market is stalled, and with obvious reasons. Wilson goes, Houston gets 5 picks for Watson. You got Wentz. Mid-round picks at most for either Mayfield or Garoppolo, and then potential suitors for Mayfield. Right now, I think the most likely are Seattle, the Texans, the Panthers, and the Lions. And the Lions, I kind of question, just because they've got $27 million tied up in Jared Goff, and Goff has some of the same question marks that Baker does about him. So the Lions don't seem terribly realistic. The Seahawks seem like a logical place because I think Baker Mayfield's a pretty significant upgrade over Drew Lock.
Yeah, definitely. I mean, Drew Lock has not exactly been anything special at the NFL level. He hasn't showed what Baker Mayfield has shown, in his 4 seasons with the Browns. Again, I think it comes down to money. And, if at what point the Browns are going to kind of be willing to be like, all right, we'll take a little money, we'll take some of his salary to move him away, because I think that would be that's obviously, to me, and based on all the reporting you see out there, the big holdup comes down to money. So Seattle seems like logical. Carolina would also make a lot of sense. We know since David Tepper bought the team how desperate they've been for a quarterback to really come in and be the guy for the franchise. And it makes sense why they've obviously been so aggressive in doing so. It just obviously hasn't panned out, especially after the Sam Darnold trade. It looked great at first, and then all of a sudden he really just kind of fell backwards and really did not deliver on his haul that the Panthers traded for it again. They obviously have the 6th pick. I'd be stunned if they didn't take a quarterback. Seattle with the 9th pick. It wouldn't surprise me if they took one either. We may just have to wait until like the Friday of the draft or the Saturday of the draft to see, what kind of happens with Baker. I'd imagine it's going to be interesting to see who gets moved first between him and Garoppolo. But I think it's just going to come down to, I think, the Browns kind of understanding they're going to have to eat a little bit of that money to move on from him, especially if they want to get, a semi-decent return, like a 4th that becomes a 3rd or anything like that, down the road.
Tim Bielik, as always, man, appreciate the time and the insight. Thanks very much, Tim.
Yeah, thanks for having me, guys. Have a good day.
All right, Tim Bielik, make sure you read them. Pages of the Plain Dealer as well as cleveland.com. We're going to step aside, take a quick timeout, other side of the break. Brad Ward will join us. We'll continue talking Browns. Brad is from the All Eyes on Cleveland podcast as well as brownswire.com. He's straight ahead on Sports4CLE. Stay with us.
Come back to go forward. Back to learning new things. Back to pursuing your dreams. Tri-C has flexible learning options to fit your life. And every year, more than 1,000 local companies provide Tri-C students with real-world learning. The right education can boost your lifetime earning power by hundreds of thousands of dollars. Start now with a college education you can afford. Tri-C, where futures begin.
The Ohio Lottery Partners in Education program recognizes role model students and teachers from across Ohio. Nominations can now be done completely online. To nominate a deserving teacher or student, go to ohiolottery.com. In the About section, find Partners in Education. There you will find links to the nomination forms. Students kindergarten through 12th grade can be academic all-stars. Teachers can be honored as a Teacher of the Month. The Ohio Lottery Partners in Education, where stars shine.
I am powerful beyond my wildest imagination.
I will define my future.
I will keep challenging myself to improve.
Because I am a future leader of this great nation.
I will be responsible for raising a beautiful family.
And educating not only my generation, but many more to come.
I will make a difference in my community.
And I will stand up for what I believe in.
I will not settle for simply chasing my dreams, I will achieve them.
Because I was given a chance.
An opportunity.
A home.
At Family, Career, and Community Leaders of America.
The ultimate leadership experience.
FCCLA has been one of the greatest experiences of my life.
It's made me who I am today.
Join us. We'll build a new future together.
Time for us to head back to the voicemail of Truth and Reason. This one about Baker Mayfield and his situation here with the Browns.
You know what? I think Baker holds all the cards. And you know what? He's going to have the last laugh because he's going to have the pick of the litter now. So let me have your thoughts on that one. Thank you very much.
All right. As always, we appreciate all of the voicemails. He doesn't really hold all the cards just because he's under contract. So if the Browns want to let him sit, it'll cost him $19 million against the salary cap, but he can just sit there. So Brad, let's welcome in Brad Ward, All Eyes on Cleveland podcast, as well as brownswire.com. Baker's really kind of at the mercy of Andrew Berry at this point. Agree or disagree?
Yeah, I agree. The Browns had lost some leverage in the situation a little bit, but it's not direct leverage with Baker Mayfield. It's more of like kind of leverage in the market. Baker doesn't have a say unless the Browns cut him, and I don't see that happening. I think that there are some teams, the Seahawks, the Panthers, the Falcons even, some other teams out there that have to make decisions on quarterback going into this draft. Are they going to take somebody in a not so great quarterback class, or would they rather go with Baker Mayfield? And I think it makes some sense for some of these teams to go with Mayfield rather than, roll the dice on a second round graded quarterback in the top 10, right? And I think that makes some sense For the Panthers, I think it makes some sense for Seattle, although I think they like Malik Willis, so we'll see what happens there. But I think somebody takes him in a trade by the end of the draft, or if not right after at the latest. After this kind of either materializes for some teams, see how their quarterback room shapes up, and that'll kind of change the leverage on his position. I think the Browns will probably eat between $5 and $10 million and get a mid-round pick back, and that'll probably be how it goes. I would guess. I don't think it comes to cutting him.
Yeah, and I'm with you. That $5 or $10 million that they eat gives them another 10 or 15 million that they can then improve the roster, and they can't really do it because they'll be up against the salary cap until they get rid of that. We found this one really interesting. So these are ranking all of the number one overall picks from 2000 till the present, and this is from CBSSports.com. So number one overall was Eli Manning. Number 2 was Cam Newton. Number 3 was Matthew Stafford. Number 9, Myles Garrett. 15, Jadeveon Clowney. And 19 was Baker Mayfield, just ahead of Courtney Brown. I guess what that tells you, number one overall picks do not pan out very often in NFL circles. And I get it. Eli Manning won a couple of Super Bowls, but I don't think you'd rank him up there as one of the elite of the elites.
No, this is a tough list for me. I was kind of all over the place with this list. I had some questions about it. I mean, how do you put Goff at 10 right behind Myles Garrett? That one kind of blew my mind. Alex Smith all the way up at 7. Like, I know he was a good quarterback in the end, but it took him a long time to get there. And he wasn't like special by any stretch of the imagination, right? He's all the way up at 7. And then they've got like Bradford ahead of Derek Carr. I didn't understand that one. They've got Jameis Winston ahead of Carr, which is weird, I think. Some of this stuff didn't make a whole lot of sense to me, this list. And Myles at 9, I thought was not doing him justice on this list.
Yeah, and it just goes to show, number one overall picks, I mean, you think, again, Eli Manning had a fine career. He's probably going to end up being a Hall of Famer because he won 2 Super Bowls. But it wasn't like you thought of him as, and it might have been because of the era that he played in with Brady and those guys. It's just very interesting. And speaking of interesting, I know you wrote on this topic. Do you think Baker Mayfield was Plan B if the Browns didn't get Deshaun Watson? Was he ever Plan B?
I don't think so. I think that this front office's default is to respond with the answer that generates the least amount of interest and discloses the least amount of information about what they were actually planning to do. So after Watson was landed, it makes sense to say that Mayfield was Plan B. You're going to hear a lot of people tell you that they really believe that's the way it was. I don't believe that. I think this front office is smarter than that. When I hear things like 5-month odyssey and you do the math on that, that's the middle of the season, they were looking at Watson. They had made a decision, in my opinion, to move away from Mayfield, and he was probably their last resort. I think that, and I was talking, I had Nate Ulrich of the Beacon Journal on my show last night, and we were talking about this same topic, and it feels like I think that if they wouldn't have landed Watson, we may have seen a secondary bidding war or a secondary sweepstakes for Matt Ryan, and then maybe Garoppolo would have been on the table before going back to Baker, because they had to know when they took that plane to Houston that Baker was going to sever ties and react the way that he was. I mean, that's Baker Mayfield, right? I mean, we couldn't have been surprised by that reaction, I don't think.
No, I'm with you. They know Baker Mayfield more so than anybody. So let me ask you this, skill set wise, you've got Deshaun Watson, you've got Jacoby Brissett, and you've got Joshua Dobbs. Those are all very different but similar skill sets. And you look at Baker Mayfield, and he doesn't fit that. He does not fit what those three do well.
No, and, it makes a lot of sense. It's not hard to draw that line with these three guys. I think they're all very smart quarterbacks as far as, be able to read a defense, break things down. They're intelligent guys on the football field for sure. All three of them, they all can make plays off schedule. They all can make plays with their legs. So I think the idea here is basically we can put in an offense, and if Watson is out 4 to 6 games, 8 games, whatever it is, we can and put in Brissett and not miss a beat and run the same offense. Whereas I think last year, even though initially it felt a lot like Keenum was the ideal backup for Mayfield, it really didn't turn out that way. They did have to change the offense a lot for Keenum, I think, when he was in. Even you noticed that in the 2 games that he played, I think. So this, I think they align things more so that they can run one offense all in sync and lockstep together. So I think it makes a lot of sense that their traits line up, and that makes sense for the offense.
Brad Ward, the host of the All Eyes on Cleveland podcast, also from BrownsWire.com, and I'm going to step aside, take a quick time out. We turn our attention to the draft. Some of Brad's favorite wide receivers that could be there at 44. We'll take a look at one of his mock drafts. We'll also preview the Cavs and the Nets play-in game straight ahead on Sports4CLE. Stay with us. The Ohio Lottery Partners in Education program recognizes role model students and teachers from across Ohio. Nominations can now be done completely online. To nominate a deserving teacher or student, go to ohiolottery.com. In the About section, find Partners in Education. There you will find links to the nomination forms. Students kindergarten through 12th grade can be academic all-stars. Teachers can be honored as a Teacher of the Month. The Ohio Lottery Partners in Education, where stars shine. We continue talking Browns with Brad Ward from Browns Wire, as well as the All Eyes on Cleveland podcast. So, Brad, we'll get into your mock draft in a minute. Who are some of your favorite wide receivers that you think might be there at 44 when the Browns pick?
Yeah, I definitely have kind of honed in on this. I think the guy that the Browns had in, Christian Watson, is very intriguing, right? The size mixed with the speed, the athleticism. But I think he's going up draft boards. I don't think he'll be there at 44. And I think that he probably goes either late first round or early second. I would be surprised if he's still there. Somebody may even take a flyer on him earlier than that because I think the upside is so high with a guy like him. I do like guys that I think are realistically there at 44. I like George Pickens a ton. I like Alec Pierce a ton if you're going for a bigger wide receiver and a higher upside guy. I think both those guys have great upside, bigger wide receivers, good speed. I think Sky Moore fits if you're looking for a guy with a higher ceiling and a guy that's more NFL ready. I think he's a little more polished as far as a route runner and a guy that could contribute right away. So I think that makes a lot of sense. And if you're looking to fill that slot role, I also like John Mechie a lot. From Alabama as far as speed goes. But those are 4 guys I like a ton there. There's other guys I like I like David Bell a lot, but I think he's more of at 78. I think Mechie's probably more of a 78 type guy too. So I don't think, if you're looking second, third round, I think that you can find this wide receiver class, Dave, is interesting in that I don't think it has the same top-end talent as past classes, but it's deep enough that I think that you can find what you want anywhere in the first 3 rounds. So if you have a certain style of receiver that you want, I think you can find them in the first 3 rounds and have them contribute this year.
All right. Along those lines, you did a mock draft. We'll look at the first 4 picks for the Browns. So it'll be 2, round 3, the 2 picks, and then round 4. So you got Sky Moore and John Mechie. We'll talk a little bit about those. You got Malone from Western Kentucky, D'Angelo Malone, and then an interior guy, Nick Farrell from LSU. Tell me why you think Moore and Mechie fit for the Browns, and then we'll get into the 2 defensive guys in a minute.
Yeah, ideally I would have probably gotten 1 big one and 1 little one there, but I ended up with both speed guys. I've been trying to do those on different site sheets today, and it's different how they lay out, the mock simulators. So, and I think, each site is a little bit different and value players differently. So they lay out differently. Obviously, I would have rather had a Pickens or a Pierce and a Moore, ideally, but I like both of those guys. And I like Moore enough enough on the outside to take Mechie with him that they could both help, because you're adding a ton of speed to your offense there. I think wide receiver is the priority. I think edge also is there. I like Malone's upside. I think he could help on, in sub packages on third downs. I still think they're banking on Clowney coming back at this point. If that's not the case, then they should be really looking hard at 44 for an edge if they don't think Clowney is going to come back, or if they don't have a plan B from Clowney in free agency, because they're going to need that edge. I think that there's some analytics that are new out right now kind of pointing to stopping the run and interior defensive line as not being quite as important in today's NFL defenses. And I think maybe the Browns might be, and if you look at some of their past year's moves, they might be along those lines of thinking. So I think maybe the interior defensive line, they might be looking to fill with some stopgap pieces, either from free agency on one-year deals and some guys in the draft that can play roles, maybe a first or second round guy and a first or second down guy, and then, rotate some guys in that do different things. So I do think they need to add pieces there, but I don't know if they will prioritize an interior guy all the way up at 44. Maybe they do. A guy like Logan Hall, I think, can play inside and outside, so that's really intriguing. So I think that they would value a guy like him more. I think that what they're looking at on the interior is somebody that can get to the passer more than stop the run. So.
All right, before I let you go, one last question. Who are some names you think the Browns may trade up for in the second round if they fall, say, within, 7-8 spots of where they're sitting at 44?
Boy, move up in the second to the late first?
Or up higher in the second. Even up higher in the second.
I think that I think they could go up for an edge. I think that Enagbari is very interesting. I think that if he's there, I think Leal from Texas A&M is interesting if he's there as an edge that you could maybe move up and get. They could be there at 44 too, though. It really just depends. It's all going to depend on how the draft board falls, right? I know they love Treylon Burks, right? And would they go up to get a guy like him? Maybe. They've had him in. I know it was confirmed through Nate yesterday that they're going to have another meeting with him virtually. So obviously they're doing their due diligence on him. So maybe that's a guy they come up and get. If he falls to late first round, there is some value in getting that extra year, right? And getting in the back end of the first round and getting that extra year on a rookie deal, especially with how much money is getting paid to these wide receivers. Dave, I think that's going to push some of these wide receivers up the board, right? We're seeing $30 million go to wide receivers on the free agent market. There's a lot of value in getting a good one on a rookie deal.
All right. As always, Brad, great stuff. Appreciate the time and the insight. Brad Ward from BrownsWire.com, as well as All Eyes on Cleveland podcast. Thanks, Brad.
Thanks for having me, Dave.
All right. So the Cavs getting ready for that play-in game against the Brooklyn Nets to try to get into the NBA playoffs. If they win tonight, they would be the 7th seed. Jared Allen ruled out, but J.B. Bickerstaff talked about the progress he is making.
He's doing well. He's working out. He's starting to do more with both hands. Again, so we're just kind of in a wait and see.
You see practice with you guys yesterday?
We didn't do much of a practice yesterday. Yesterday was a lot of walkthrough and individual stuff. So he went through his own individual stuff.
What about today?
Same thing. He went through his individual stuff. A lot of what we're focusing on is for tonight. And him being out, we need guys to get those reps that we're going to play tonight.
So Allen out for the 7 versus 8 game, but making progress. The keys is what is important. So Cavs will play the Nets. If they win, they're in as the 7th seed. If they lose, they have to play the winner of the Hawks and Charlottes for the 8th seed. J.B. Bickerstaff talked about the keys facing the Nets with this young team with not a whole lot of playoff experience.
Throughout this whole season, any successes that we've had have always come together and because of our group. So we need to make sure that our focus and, our preparation and all those things, but beyond that, the spirit that we've played with, the things that you've witnessed and seen how we celebrate one another, how we compete together. Like that has to overcome all else. And that'll be the only way we have a shot tonight. You know, we have to take the experience that we have as a coaching staff, the experience that their teammates have, and just give them as much knowledge as we can so that when, you know, certain things do happen, they're not surprised and it doesn't take them time to make the adjustment. You know, we have to be prepared for the physicality of this game. You know, we have to be prepared for, you know, how we value possessions and how every single possession matters. You know, so those are all things that mentally we have to be ready for and can't be surprised when it happens.
Cavs in the play-in game against the Nets. Winner is the 7th seed in the Eastern Conference. 7 o'clock tip-off tonight. That'll do it for this edition of Sports for CLE. See you back here tomorrow at 4 o'clock. Scheduled guests, Jeff Risdon from BrownsWire.com, Mac Robinson from 92.3 The Fan. That is tomorrow, 4 o'clock on Sports for CLE. We'll see you then. Have a good night, everybody.